Bonjour, fit femme. Welcome to In Bed with the Fitness Industry. Once again, I am Nathalie Lacombe, your host, your coach, and Cupid in your career and in your business. And I have a friend and a dear colleague today joining us. Thank you so much for coming in bed, Tosca Reno.
This is the most amazing way to do an interview, I have to say. Really
Sweet.
casual, you know. I didn't have to stress too much about what to wear. It's fabulous. Nice to be here.
If anything, thinking more about taking stuff off and then stuff a little bit less restrictive, hopefully, in the
That's
material and
right.
everything that we are in bed. For those of you who has yet to have the pleasure of connecting with Tosca either online or through her books or through her media appearances or in person, she is a New York Times best-selling author, the founder of the Eat Clean Diet, a health and wellness expert, transformation coach, and a motivational speaker, the star of a Gemini Award winning reality TV show, a physique competitor, and a mother of four. She was once 204 pounds and officially obese, and she is a product of her own product. Welcome again, Tosca. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I am so excited to be with all of you, with you, Natalie, and also listening ears. My intention every day is to serve to my highest and best. So let's see if we can do that from our boudoir.
From a boudoir. Excellent. You are someone who I have always had a boudoir connection with, I must be honest. So maybe this is a long,
Ooh,
a long time coming, you and I, in some of the parts of health that you and I have always been passionate about. Let's
yes.
get into those boudoir questions. Talk to us
Okay.
because you gave me a very specific and lovely answer. Talk to us about what you love wearing to bed.
Well, I have to say, I love wearing men's silky pajamas. And why I like that is number one, silk feels fabulous against the skin, but I like the roominess in men's pajamas. I tend to do better in tailored clothing. And I have a favorite shop in Ontario. I don't know if we can share the name or
Yeah,
not,
of
but
course. Go ahead.
Legs and Lace in Aurora. And yeah, I've never gone awry. Now I'm not wearing those right. I'm wearing my prison garb at the moment.
but but we'll be able to find those if they're looking for those one day.
Yes.
And you have a which doesn't surprise me at all, knowing you. You have a very specific or a very lovely bedtime routine and nighttime routine. What does that entail for you?
Well, I've come to learn that having a routine, a decidedly carved out routine for evening is as important as my miracle morning routine. So,
Mm,
but I learned that the hard way, of course. So, yes, I need to kind of bring myself down. So I stop eating by 7 o'clock because that way I can have a good 12-hour fast. I'm not eating anything. I might have an herbal tea. But then I bring my evening down. I bring the energy down into a place where I
mm,
can go inward and think about the day. And I jot a few lines about how the day went and what I'm anticipating doing the next morning. So a
mm,
little bit of journaling, a little bit of introspection. I like to read, and I always meditate to close out the day. And I
mm,
specifically listen to binaural beats, which are the beats that go one ear, one ear, other, because it helps you get into a deeper alpha, delta, deeper sleep state
mm,
faster.
mm. And then and around what time? Remind us what time you like to be asleep by.
Oh gosh, usually my favorite is 9:30.
Mm.
Sometimes when we have launches and other things going on, it gets to be a little bit later, but yeah, 9:30, 10.
And what does that miracle morning look like for you when you wake up in the morning?
Okay, so always beside my bed.
Everybody get grab a pen and paper, everyone. Yes.
So the first thing I do is I hydrate. So even before anything else,
Hmm.
I will make sure that I have at least 500 mils of water. So a good amount of water. Well, sometimes I have to go pee, obviously. Uh, and then I actually start my day with the meditation at that point because
Mm,
I like to tap into the subconscious mind, which will be most present during sleep. So I do that. And then I journal. because sometimes messages come through. And also, those first 2 hours after you wake up from a deep sleep are your most creative. So that's the time, if you want to brainstorm ideas or write
Mm,
something or pursue a thought, it's the moment to do it.
mm,
Then you can be crazy. And I did a F45 workout this morning at 6 a.m. So I like to get the
mm,
workout in.
mm,
And then I will nourish myself with a clean breakfast. And that's a
yes.
pretty in-depth morning. I will add that I like to feed my brain as much as I like to feed myself. And
Mm,
so I will do reading like Hal Elrod's Miracle Morning as well.
mm. I love that sentence that you used, pursue a thought. It's so interesting how people feel about thoughts. I know I'm using two concepts there, but how people feel about thoughts and how they can be distractions or they can be overwhelming or they can be this. But for the concept of giving your brain that dimmer switch of wake up in the morning versus full light switch, giving your brain that dimmer switch in the morning to
Right.
pursue those thoughts and see if it actually leads you to something that's purposeful, allowing it some space and some time. And again, the right brain waves to be able to do that. I love that concept. Thank you for sharing that, Tosca.
And notice, Natalie, I did not say get on my cell phone and check social media
Uh-huh. What?
because my phone is over there. Like it is
Mm,
not anywhere near my bed because that is a sure way to shut off that creative brain process. So,
yes. And get our sympathetic nervous system
yeah,
going into fight, flight, or freeze as well it should, because that's what it does in the morning when your brain's vulnerable, right? So
exactly.
I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that. Tosca, you have one of the things that, and you and I have had the pleasure of working together, collaborating in some way, shape, or form
Yes.
for a little over a decade now. You have been your authentic self. You have been Tosca media and Tosca the person and Tosca the mom and Tosca the educator in everything that you do. And I think your audience really connects with that, including the strong spaces, the vulnerable spaces, and everything else. How did you navigate what to share and what not to share, how to share and how not to share it through those ups and downs? And how do you still do it now?
Wow. Well, I feel I just don't have the bandwidth in my brain to come up with a persona and be that persona. So
Mm,
it's me or nothing.
mm,
Um, I will say, though, Natalie, that I am having some thoughts, some deeper thoughts about realizing that I may not share all of the details. In other
mm,
words, I've always felt that it's a thing that I have to do to come on a line, and my hair has to be done and my eyes and everything.
mm,
And I'm thinking to myself lately, as maybe evidenced by posts that I've put up in the last little while,
mm,
eh, that is not the point, because it is not
mm,
about me anyway. When we are dealing with an online audience, an online presence, we have a community, and it's them that I serve.
mm,
So I'm rethinking things. I've always been fairly straightforward about how I live my life, but I'm
mm.
thinking, there's some grittier moments. Maybe I should just let the gritty moments come out.
Mm. It's interesting. You actually shared something with me, and this is a few years ago, but you mentioned, looking at the post because you do have a big audience for a Canadian wellness leader. You do have a large audience, people who've been following you for years and years, as well as some more recent ones. But you had mentioned to me, you're like, I'll post things that are very curated,
Mhm.
and then you had posted something that was just like I don't know if it was working out, sweaty, like I said, hair, makeup, don't care, that kind of thing. And you were like, people responded so differently
Yes,
when you were right. You were absolutely yourself, just like they are in their homes, again, just like they are
exactly.
in their lives, right? Interesting.
Yes. Yeah. So there was a big disconnect there for me, and an aha, like, okay, yep, I need to embrace that more. And then yesterday, I don't know if you saw on Instagram and Facebook, I posted a very big story about me,
Yes, I noticed.
breaking down some canvases. And I got a lot of comments from people like, oh my God, you did that all by yourself. That's really impressive. And I'm thinking to myself, It's not that impressive. I do this all the time. I'm
Mm.
a beast. I'm very strong and I'm very like I'm gonna get it done. And I thought to myself, oh, but the audience doesn't know that because
It
I
doesn't see that.
share that with them. Oh, light bulb. Yeah. So
It's interesting. It's always interesting those moments when people come back to us and say, I had no idea. And you're like, that is, but and then so yeah, to your point, is there where am I shutting the windows? Not
right.
necessarily doors, but where am I putting the blinds down and when am I putting the blinds up and how can that again help people, right? So
Yeah.
because your commitment to your own personal health and your own personal wellness seems unwavering. Seems again what you would see necessarily potentially from the outside.
Yes.
First of all, I guess my first question is that true? Is that the case, or when does it waver from your perspective rather than necessarily what we see? And also, how do you find that creativity of continual drive in order to not let what's happening outside of your control impact your health and what matters to you most?
I think it all comes down to consciousness.
Mm,
When I was at my low point, and I would say it was rock bottom when I was that 204-pound woman, and then discovered eating clean and training and how strong my foundation was. The feeling of feeling so good was so good that I just didn't ever want to go back to the pain of being that broken,
mm,
overweight, almost like discarded person, because I had really run out of trust and faith in myself up until that point. So, number one, the feeling, the emotional connection with myself, who I truly was or am, felt so good. I thought I can't do anything to ruin this. But that wasn't the full picture, Natalie. So, as you know, in the beginning, eating clean is exercise and eating clean. Those are the two
mhm,
components of the lifestyle.
mm,
But life had a way of giving me, throwing a brick to my head. And in 2008 and then leading on into 2000, well, the years after, there's been a real decade of lessons. Some people would
mm,
call it struggle. And in the beginning, I did too. And
mm,
this is where I realized the value of not only taking care of my eating clean self and my exercise self, but my emotional self. And I
mm,
had no clue how to do that. So I will say this, I will say that it's unwavering because I feel so good in a feel good body.
mm,
Now I feel so strong in an emotionally connected, feel good body where I'm practicing all three of those pillars. And
mm,
that me gives me the strength to be able to cope with, for example, COVID, the last 2 years of isolation, or downturns in business, or struggles in life, or
mhm.
whatever it may be. So, um, the unwaveringness comes from a certainty that these principles deliver. And without them, I will only be a shadow of myself.
Mm. Thank you for sharing that. It is, I mean, for those of us that have read the books, that have done some of the online programs, that have participated in some of them, I mean, your focus on physical health, mental health, and I would say way before a lot of other people were talking about it, immune health,
Yes.
way before a lot of people were talking about it, cognitive health.
Yes.
I wonder if even the emotional stuff was always there because really separating mental health and cognitive health and immune health and emotional health is a little bit nuanced. But I wonder if the foundation was always there. If perhaps what's happened in the last years is all of those connections have come together under an umbrella that you feel even stronger in because you were talking about some of these things before a lot of people were. I think there was an assumption that it was exercise and
Yes.
nutrition, but you've been talking about cognitive health for the longest time. You've been talking about immune health for the longest time.
Yes.
So
Yes.
really those ones, and the connections to those were there.
Yes. And so now the the expression comes to my mind constantly
Mm,
that we as human beings are literally a spark of the divine. And when we can think about the way we nourish ourselves as with mindfulness as a way of, and I call it, in food is information for the cells. Food is
Mm.
light for my cells. And what is light? Light is love and knowledge. So now what I think about as the highest expression of the human self for ourselves and for those listening is this opportunity to think differently about what we're eating so that it's not just filling a hole, but it is feeding a need. And when we do that, when we're conscientious about nutrition in such a way as to do that for ourselves, we can become better people. We are more enlightened and we become a greater example of that light for others to follow.
Mm. And bringing that to that concept of wellness, which I know is a big part of what you communicate now. Again, that kind of umbrella that everything feeds into. And I love that when you say filling the holes, and it's like I can see it literally, and I can see it figuratively when we talk about what resides in those cells
Yeah.
isn't purely, organic matter, and there's everything else that comes along with that from the perspective of mindfulness. So sharing that, it's I mean, when we talk about wellness, and I think for a lot of my colleagues, bringing ourselves towards wellness and bringing ourselves towards mental health and mental fitness and all of these other things, I think brings up concerns of not feeling confident of what to say or how to deal with things that might get anywhere close to trauma. And the reality is we've all been through a traumatic event the last couple of
Yes.
years in
Yes.
very different ways, but we've been through it. So trauma is everywhere.
Yes.
How do we start to bring ourselves towards confident wellness coaches? Slowly but surely, understanding that those things will be there, and we can speak to them with compassion.
Well, because we've all suffered trauma of some sort, not just
Mm,
from COVID, but from other multiple events in lives, it does
yeah.
behoove us to be willing to explore those elements of ourselves.
Mm,
And so I know for me, I did a lot of work with Dr. Benjamin Hardy, who's written multiple books, but one of the pieces that I found most informative for me is something he calls the trauma transformer tool, where it's an invitation for you to list all the events that have traumatized you. And you can go back 5 years, 25 years, whatever you want. Then
mm,
beside them, write all the negative emotions or what you thought were repercussions from those traumatizing events. Then write the possible positive lesson, if there was one, and usually there is. And then you reframe the story. So leading with a story of trauma, I'm a victim,
mm,
I lost everything, and then moving into reframing that puts you in a position where you're at least willing to look at the sometimes, darker parts of ourselves that we don't necessarily want to reveal.
mm,
And even that generates a willingness to want to speak to someone, a professional, mental health professional, or a wellness coach, someone who will help and guide you through the process of processing and integrating the lessons. Because I will say this,
mm,
not every trauma is a bad, if you want to label bad trauma. There are
mm,
many that are, but not everyone. And how I'm going to put that is this: there's a concept called eustress, EU
mm,
stress. It's positive stress. Now, there was an experiment done some years ago with multiple scientists, botanists, geneticists, and such. They called it the biome. And they created this space underneath which it was a completely closed off space, but they grew plants and seeds and trees and all kinds of living things. And the project was going really well. Things were growing, things were green. It was like, oh, wow, this is it. We found it. No disease, no pests, no wind, no nothing. At a certain point, all the trees just fell over sideways. And the reason for that is because there was no trauma. There was no positive stress. There was no
mm,
source of wind or infection, disease, or breakage that caused us strengthening to help
mm,
that organism stand tall. And so for us as human beings, the task is, yes, I've been traumatized. Now, what am I going to do with that information? What story am I going to tell about myself that is going to benefit me in the long run? Because my purpose in this life here is to live to my highest and best, is to be that creative human being. And so that's where I think we can begin to have a conversation about trauma and stress in a different way.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I love that concept of unless a concept, that reality really from that study is unless there's some wind to blow on the trees and to strengthen those roots. And that's where the roots, that's where the strength comes from, is
Right.
from being able to withstand those challenges. And so it's an opportunity for a mindset, or at least a perspective change when it comes to that.
Awesome.
Um, Before I let you go, and I feel like we could do this for 2 hours, but before I
I
let you go, we'll have to
know.
do it
You're
again.
right.
Let me ask you, as you see, I mean, you and I have been to a fitness event recently. You
Yes.
go to a lot of events. You see a lot of what's evolving in our
Yes.
industry. As you see what's happening, what inspires you in the fitness, and I'll expand it to wellness industry? What inspires you? What are you grateful for when you look around to the industry now?
I'm grateful for the willingness to have the conversations about emotional and mental wellness that
Mm,
really never were a part of the conversation, in at least in my heyday and before.
mm,
And so if you had an ailment, or if you had a mental problem, an anxiety, a hurt, a trauma, shut up and put up, don't talk
mm,
about it. So now there seems to be a greater willingness to speak about those kinds of things that do happen to us as part of the human condition. So I'm very grateful for that, because I think that is vulnerability for us, and that is also strength.
mm,
And it makes others feel like, oh, so she had those problems. Well, I can do it too. And so I'm not so othered and isolated by the things that have happened to me. So I think that's
mm,
that's really positive. And I have to say, I celebrate very strongly, because I've always been open and welcoming to this, but diversity that we're seeing, the diversity in persons, in characters, in athletes, in speaking, in skin color, in all of it. It's all diversifying in such a way as to encompass the entire human spirit.
mm. Agreed. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your inspiration. Thank you for being, again, so authentic, and sharing the evolution. Allow that. Merci beaucoup, mon ami. Thank you for joining us in the boudoir, and we hope to connect with you again very soon. Merci, Tasca.
Oh, thank you so much. With joy in my heart. Thank you.